This lesson is going to be about triads, those basic 3-note chords that you first learn. Here's C major and C minor, and you can probably hear that they are major or minor just by me playing. I haven't even written anything yet, but let's hit the notes. So you notice the word triad has this part of the word tri that means 3. That's an important component to this lesson. Sort of the overarching word to refer to anything that is more than one note is chord. So a triad is a chord. Not all chords are triads, if you want to think about it that way. And I've already given you an example of major and minor. Those are usually what you learn to hear before you recognize them in notes, but let's get right to it. Here's my treble clef. Here's the first triad I played, C major. And you'll notice that not only is it 3 notes, but they are also built out of thirds. The bottom note to the middle note is a third apart. The middle note to the top note is a third apart. That's another way that the number 3 works into this. I can just keep going. I can pick any given note and write thirds above it. I'll go up a step, and then I'll come down here. Now, if you already know a certain range of keys, which you should at this point, you can probably identify this as F major, G major, and D minor. So it has nothing to do with whether you're playing white keys or not. It has to do with what these 2 thirds are in how you've configured the 3 notes of the chord. So if we come over here, I'm going to write C again, but I'm going to now put the flat in it that you heard when I played C major and then C minor. The middle note changes, and the middle note is lower. So that also doesn't mean that minor means you're going to have a flat. Flats don't need minor. I just said this triad is also minor, and it's just white keys. So let's get to the nitty-gritty of the thirds. And we're going to need the keyboard for this. So if I mark these 3 keys of C major, and then I'm going to jump up and mark these 3 keys of D minor. I realize this one is just a step higher, but I'm spreading them out over the keyboard so you can see the difference. And then, so I'm going from this key to this key, and from this key to this key. So when you look at it on the staff, it looks pretty obvious that from this note to this note is up to 1, 2, 3, so that's a third. When you look at the keys, it gets a little bit more complicated because, especially if your eyes are taking in the black keys, you realize you have more to keep track of. And in fact, between the C and the E are these 3 keys in the middle. However, from E to G, there are only 2 keys in between. So 1/3 is larger than the other third. And this is what we call a major third and a minor third. There's an entire lesson about the different qualities of intervals. Now, if you notice, the thirds for D minor are exactly the opposite. The bottom third is the smaller third, and the top third, F to A, now has the 3 keys that we've skipped over, and that's our major third. So you're just flipping the major and minor. The one on the bottom is what tells you the quality. Let me go back. This is your major triad, and this is your minor triad. So it doesn't matter whether you're playing black keys or white keys or a combination of both. You need to look at exactly what the intervals are. The other way you can do it, of course, is if you realize in the key of F major, these are the three notes that you would start with. So this is an F major triad. In the key of G, these are the first, third, and fifth notes of that major scale. So you would identify this as G major. And then if you know D major has an F sharp and this doesn't have the F sharp, then you know it's D minor. So the other step you can take is if you know your major scale, maybe you haven't played F minor yet, but you know if you take that third note and you lower it, that makes this, not only does that make this major third a minor third, but it also changes the top interval as well. So I'll just put this off to the side, and then you would have to change major to minor in both cases. So in 3 of these cases, I did change the middle white key to a black key, and oftentimes your hand will kind of learn, all right, if I just take my middle finger and move it to a black key, then that will magically make it minor. That's not really what's going on. You have to know exactly what the major scale is that you're starting with, and then how to lower this note in the middle by a half step. So now you're playing C minor, and you've changed your qualities of those thirds. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some triads to identify. We're going to switch to bass clef. I'm going to give you quite a wide range. Let's start here. So you may not have played all of these scales, but if you read the notes carefully and you play them, you might hear right away which one it is, and you also will be able to look, what thirds am I actually looking at, and what does that tell me? The other point to keep in mind is that we're only talking about chords that are in root position, meaning the lowest note is what gives it its name. So the next lesson will be about inversions, and that changes. But for all of these, the lowest note is what is going to be the name when you fill in your answers. All right, go to it, copy them down, and do your best to identify them.